Hi Titans, and welcome back to another Titan Academy video. Today we're going to be talking about how to create a simple form in Titan Web. We'll be covering form structure, various input fields that you can use in your form, basic conditional logic, validations for your fields, including mandatory fields, where we show you how to hide and show fields, and finally, how to trigger an action on your form, such as a thank you message. Let's get started. So the first thing that you want to do is add your elements to your form. And the first element that we want to add is our form element. So you can see we have this pink plus button on the side of our screen. We'll click on that. We'll navigate to our form tab and we'll grab this center element right over here, this form element. Now we can also always search like this and bring our form element onto the page. You'll notice that the form element will ask me how it wants to be structured when we initially add it to our page. You can see here that it's asking for the number of columns that we want for our form element, the number of rows, and the spacing in between our rows. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. I'll say we only want one column, and I'll show you how we can add columns after the fact. And I'll change the spacing slightly to be a bit bigger between my rows. You, of course, can format this however you'd like, and you can decide if this is how you'd like all new form elements that you add to follow this structure or not. In my case, we're not going to set it as default, and I'll go ahead and apply. You can see my form element is added to the screen. Now, if I want to add a column to my form element, all I need to do is click on this pink plus button over here, and you can see that's added a new column to my form element. If I want to add a new row, I can click on the pink plus button over here, and that will add a new row to my form element. Now I'm going to make my form element a little bit bigger, and I'm going to start putting some input fields in here. The first field that I'm going to put in will be a text field. I'll add a couple of these. Now, in order to name our fields, we'll click on the pink gear icon when our field is selected. That will bring us to the field settings. And I'll go ahead and change the label of my field to first name. Now I can also change the placeholder, of course. I'm going to leave it like it is for now. And I'll go ahead and change the name of my second field. Last name. Now, very important is that my fields have a label, and that's how my fields will be referred to throughout my project. But I might have many fields on my form, and some might have the same label as one another. So we also want to make sure that we give each of our fields a special metadata tag. You'll notice here we have a tab here called metadata. I'll click on that. And here you can see that I can give a tag to my field. I'll go ahead and do so. And I'll actually write it a little bit differently from the label so that we can see later the difference between the tag and the label of my field. It's also recommended to give a comment to your fields. In this case, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I can write something like this is the contact first name. And this will help you understand what the point of this field is. Let's give a metadata tag for our last name. Okay, and this is important because when later we want to reference these fields, we'll see this metadata tag, and it will help us identify our fields a lot easier. All right, so we've shown how to add some fields into our form element. And now let's go ahead and add a couple of more fields. So we added some text fields. I'm going to add an email field now. Okay, now what's special about the email field, and we'll talk about validation soon, but an email field has its own built-in validation to make sure that the input that's put into this email field will actually be an email. And we'll demonstrate that soon. For now, let's just erase the word field here. So this says email, and let's go ahead and give this a metadata tag as well. And now let's add a phone field. Okay, here's our phone field. And for our phone field, I'm just going to say phone number. Let's say cell phone number. And here I'm just going to write phone. And going back to the settings here for this field, I'm going to go ahead and give it a default country because I know that all of my users will be working within the United States. So we'll give them a default country code, and that should be good for now. And for my date field, I'm going to call this date, let's say birth date. And again, coming to the metadata, I'm going to write date, let's do like this, DOB. And coming back to the content tab, I am going to format this in the American style of day, month, year. And I think we're good to go with this field. Now, a couple of more things that I want to do with my form. I want to add a button to my form to trigger an action. And we'll get to that a little bit later, how to trigger the action. But for now, we'll just add the button. And I'm going to go over to my button here, drag in a button. And I'm going to rename this by either double clicking here or coming to the settings and writing in the text, submit. All right. Now I want this button to be centered in the middle of my form. And right now I have two different columns. So I'm going to show you how you can merge columns. I'm going to click on the three dots over here and I'll go ahead and merge all. Note that you can also do a custom merge if you have multiple cells. I can decide which groups to merge together. All right, so in this case, I'm just going to do merge all and not do a custom merge. And I'm going to click on my button. And you'll notice on my toolbar here, I have the option to position my button over here to the left, to the right, or to the center of its parent container. In this case, its parent container is this form element. And so I'm going to center it like so. Once my button is centered, I'm good to go. Let's do some conditional logic for our form. All right. And let's actually add a row to our form. So I'm going to click on these three dots because I don't want to add my row on the bottom. I want to add my row after these two fields. So I'll click on these three dots and I'll add row after. And you'll notice now I have a new row here. And I'm going to add a question. Let's do it with a radio field. Okay. I'm going to add static values to my radio field. In a different video, we'll explain how to do dynamic values. And I need to give a label to each of my values and a value for each of my values. And my question here is going to be, again, going to the label, I'm going to write my question and say, are you over 18? And if my user is over 18, then I'm going to want to go ahead and show this birthday field over here. So let me show you how you can do that. So first of all, let's give yes or no static values to this field. So I'm going to remove this. And for the labels, I'll write yes and no. And you can have separate values than your labels. In my case, I'm just going to use the same values for the label and for the value. Okay. And you can, of course, also have default. I'm just going to leave nothing as default so that nothing is selected, and I'll click apply. And now my options are yes and no here. And let's write a condition. Now, when writing a condition, it's important to understand where we should be writing our conditions. We want to write our conditions on the field that triggers our condition and not the field that is affected by our condition. So I want to write a condition. If you are over 18, I need you to give me your birthday to prove that you're over 18. If you're not over 18, so then I'm not going to show the birthday field at all. All right. So I'm going to click on my gear icon here for the settings for this field, and I'm going to head over to condition. I want to write this again on my triggering field. I'll configure a condition. And you'll see when I do this that I get this nice action flow that pops up, and I have a condition node right over here. I can either double click on my condition node, or I can click on these three dots and edit. And I can see my field value over here, are you over 18 value? And I can say if this equals yes, then I want one set of behavior. And if it equals no, then I want a different set of behavior. Now I can add multiple rules. In this case, I'm just going to do one rule, and we'll use the else condition. So any other eventuality other than yes will be on the no. And I'm going to name my node over here so I know what it's doing. Evaluate if over 18. I see two separate nodes, one for my outcome of yes, and one for my else. So if they answer yes, I will do one thing, and any other outcome other than yes, in my case, no or empty, will be under the else. So I'll click on this pink plus button over here, and I will do affected elements. This is how we can affect different elements in our project. In our case, we're looking to hide and show. And we want to say that if it equals yes, then we want to show the birth date field. So if you recall, we gave a metadata tag of DOB here. Okay, this is our birth date field. And you can see we see the metadata tag here, not the label. And what I'm looking to do, we have a number of things we can do to affect our elements. In our case, we're just going to do a simple show. I'm going to apply it to this specific element. Okay, sorry, I forgot to name my element, my effect elements. And this is good because now I can come back and also show that we can filter down by things that we have set already in the past. Okay, and we have different filters that we can apply to help us find our fields faster. So we're showing this field, and I'll say show DOB. And you can see now it's labeled over here, so I know exactly what this node is doing. On my else, I'm also going to do affect elements, and I'm also going to affect my DOB field. I'll select that. But in this case, I want to hide it. So if they answer no or there's no answer at all there, it should hide my birth date field. Excellent. I'll do next, and I'll say hide DOB. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is name my rule. It's really important to name my rules so that I understand exactly what they're trying to accomplish. In my case, it's something very simple. Condition to show or hide birthday field. Okay, and of course you'll have your own naming conventions for how you do this, but it's very important to name all of your rules. I'm going to go ahead and click apply. We've added our elements into a form element to give it a nice structure. We've created some conditional logic asking if you're over 18 or not. The last thing I want to do here is add some validations, and then we'll trigger the final submit. Let's make some of these fields mandatory. In order to do so, we'll click on a field, we'll click on settings, we'll click on interactivity, and there's a lot of different things that you can do under the interactivity of a field. In our case, all we're going to do is make it mandatory. Okay, let's also make our last name mandatory. And that's good for right now. The next thing I want to do is write a value rule. Okay, and I want to make a value rule on my last name that it can't include anything except for alphabet characters. So I'm going to come over to, again, settings for this field, and I'll come over to value rule, and I'll do set value rules, and I'm going to say it's only valid if alpha only. Okay, I'm only accepting alpha in my value. Now, there are many different rules you can set here. You can have it equal a certain value, contain a certain value. The length of these fields can be important. You can set regex to make a very specific validation. Same thing with JavaScript using custom. And we have some built-in validations for Israeli ID, US security, social security number, file size, and things like that. In our case, we're just doing alpha only. And I'm going to write the error message and say only alphabet. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. Great. Let's test out those value rules, and then we'll come back for our final submit. And we'll also test out our condition. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and I'm previewing my project. Okay, as you can see, I don't see my birthday field. And notice that my submit button took the place of my birthday field. And that's because we're using a form element. And one of the main things that a form element helps us with is resizing our form. And so when we hide an element in our form, the elements underneath can jump up and take their place. Now, let's fill out this form a little bit. Okay, now notice what happens if I try to add something that's not an alphabet, something from the alphabet here, not a letter. Okay, it tells me only alphabet. Okay, same thing with a special character. Okay, so if I needed to add a hyphen in my last name, it wouldn't work with this value rule. And right away, it's going to scream at me that I'm violating something here. Okay, so that's working well. Notice also my mandatory field. If I remove this, it's going to tell me this is mandatory and I need to fill this out. Great. Now let's test out our conditional logic. I'm going to go ahead and click yes. And you'll see that our birthday appears. And no, our birthday is hidden. Excellent. Okay, so now we're ready to run an action on our button. So we want to click on our gear icon, come over to interactivity, and we can configure an on-click action. Now, there's also a shortcut by clicking on this link. This will also take us to the same place. Okay, but I'll do it from here, configure on-click action. And you'll notice this looks a lot like the screen for when we configured our condition. It works in a very similar way. This will trigger, instead of based on our condition, it will trigger from clicking our button. But the screen flow, the action flow will work in the same way. So we'll click on the pink plus button here. And the first thing we want to do is validate our form. Make sure that all the fields in our form have been filled out to our liking. So I'm going to type in here, validate. Okay. And I'll do next. And now it will ask me, what exactly do I want to validate? So I'm going to say, I want to validate everything on my page. We can, of course, also validate just things on our current strip, specific fields, or a specific field. And I'm going to write here, validate all fields on form. And I'll insert that. And now you'll notice I have two output nodes, one on invalid and one valid. Let's say on invalid, I'm going to show a simple message and say, please correct your mistakes. Enter that. And you have like a full editor here where you can change the colors of these. You can do a lot of really nice things. Let's go ahead and actually make this a bit bigger. And let's change the text color to red. Okay. Error message. Okay, and let's insert that. Here's our error message. And on valid, let's show a different message. Let's actually show, first of all, a confirmation message. Okay, it's a special kind of message. And we'll say, do you want to submit your form? Of course, we don't need to do this confirmation message. We can just let them click and submit. But we'll add this confirmation message. And on confirm, I'm going to show them a different message. For now, just saying thank you. All right, let's center this and make it a bit bigger again. And let's make it green. Hard to see that. Let's do like this kind of green. Great. Okay. So again, it will validate our fields. If they're valid, it will ask us if we really want to submit our form. And if we do, then it will ask us, it will tell us thank you. Let's try this out. I'm going to go ahead and save. I'll preview. Okay, let's fill out our fields. So we'll fill this out. And for now, I'm going to leave this empty so that it will trigger our validation, because we should really fill that in. We talked also about the email field having a built-in validation. I'll show that to you now. If I add a value that's not an email, it's going to tell me it's an invalid value, unless I make it a real email, like test@test.com. Now this will be considered a real email, and it will pass validation. I'll do a phone number. Okay, and I will say I am over 18 years old. I'll select my birthday. Okay, and I'll go ahead and submit. Now notice it's telling me to please correct my mistakes, and it's showing me that this mandatory field has not been filled out. I'll correct that mistake, and let's make another mistake while we're at it and show you that it will also trigger my validation. Okay, same issue, please correct your mistakes. Finally, let's give it a good last name. And we'll do submit. I got my confirmation message. Do you want to submit your form? Again, you can do a lot of different messages, make this look a lot of different ways. You can style these messages. You have a lot of options here. I'm just going to go ahead and confirm. And now I got my thank you message. And that's all there is to it. Hope you enjoyed this video, and you'll learn more in the next video of how we can push some of this data to a database like Salesforce.